So how do you actually know God's will for your life? I mean, if you've ever felt completely frustrated waiting around for some mysterious hunch or a sudden inner voice to just, make the big decisions for you, well, you're absolutely not alone. In today's explainer, we're moving completely away from vague feelings. Instead, we're unpacking a really fascinating theological framework by Dr. Gary Meadors to help us build a rock-solid model for reasoned wisdom. Okay, let's dive right into this and look at our roadmap. We're going to build this model pillar by pillar. First up, exploring a biblical worldview, and then examining human nature through the image and the fall. Next, we'll look at the role of Scripture, before tackling a pretty provocative concept, the myth of human freedom. And finally, practicing reasoned wisdom. All right, Section 1, exploring a biblical worldview. Now, I know a biblical worldview might sound like just a purely academic concept, but it actually has intense daily application for all of us. The source material lays down a genuinely foundational rule here. Knowing God's will is not about waiting for an emotional spark. It's an active process. You literally have to reason your way to a decision based on a deeply ingrained biblical worldview and value system. Think of that worldview as your internal database. It's the exact lens through which every single tough choice has to be deliberately processed. Moving right along to Section 2, the image and the fall. So, before we can actually make those good decisions, we kind of have to understand exactly who is making them. According to the text, human beings are the imago Dei, created in the image of God. But to be clear, we aren't literal physical representations. Instead, we reflect him existentially. We think, we feel, we choose, and we self-determine. And it's this specific capacity to deliberately reflect God in our decision-making that entirely separates us from the animal kingdom, which operates heavily on instinct, and actually separates us from angels too. But, as you might guess, there's a massive complication to this beautiful design, and that's the fall. See, the fall didn't just break the world physically, it introduced what theologians call the noetic effect. This comes from the Greek word for mind, and it basically means our very thinking processes were corrupted. We're fundamentally flawed right down at the cognitive level. The fall severely damaged our mental skills and our core decision-making capacities. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer gravity of that noetic effect. As Dr. Meadors points out, we are not what we could have been. I mean, before the fall, Adam possessed mental capacities we can probably hardly even fathom today. But right now, humanity operates at a profound deficit. This is a crucial reality check for us. If our minds are inherently flawed by the fall, we absolutely cannot simply trust our unguided logic or our natural desires when we're trying to make godly decisions. This flawed nature actually manifests in specific types of rebellion, which are perfectly captured by three distinct Old Testament words. First, transgression, which originally meant trespassing, literally crossing a boundary that God deliberately set. Then there's iniquity, referring to an inherent badness or wrongness in an action itself. And finally, sin, which literally meant missing the mark, illustrating direct disobedience to instructions. They all just show exactly how our corrupted minds naturally drift away from God's design. Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds, the role of Scripture. So if our minds are corrupted by the noetic effect, we desperately need an external, ultimate guide to correct our flawed thinking, right? But how we actually use that guide matters immensely. The framework draws a really sharp contrast here between contextual interpretation and proof texting. Contextual interpretation means engaging the text seriously, understanding that poetry, narrative, and prophecy all communicate totally differently and require actual research to understand. On the flip side is proof texting. This is the dangerous, fundamentally selfish habit of just cherry-picking isolated verses to justify a decision you already want to make, completely ignoring what the original author intended. This quote from the lecture really hits the nail on the head. You just cannot play games with the text. Extracting words totally out of context to build a case for your own inner desires is a seriously flawed methodology. To truly know God's will, you gotta let the whole text transform your mind rather than twisting the text to fit whatever your current agenda is. Okay, Section 4, the myth of human freedom. Now, what's really interesting about this statement is how incredibly blunt Dr. Meadors is. Human freedom is a myth. It isn't just a casual remark either, it's a core tenet of his entire framework. And let's be honest, it sounds completely counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities, doesn't it? So let me pose this direct question to you.
If you feel like you're making hundreds of totally free choices every single day, what to eat, where to drive, who to talk to, how in the world can this source claim that human freedom is a total myth?
Well, the answer lies in our limitations. Think of it like a train, right? A train is free to move, but it can literally only go where its tracks lead. In that exact same way, human will naturally tracks with human nature. Because we are fallen, our uneducated, untransformed nature naturally leans towards selfishness. We are completely trapped by our own presuppositions. So yes, you're free to choose, but you are not free from yourself. Now, even after spiritual transformation, we actually possess both an old nature and a new nature. But you aren't like two fighting dogs trapped inside one body. You are one unified being, more like a spotted dog. You are a single composite, choosing moment by moment whether to obey the inherently selfish works of the flesh or the transformed mindset represented by the fruit of the Spirit.
Which brings us to Section 5, practicing reasoned wisdom.
So the crucial point is this. True wisdom is not mere pragmatism, just doing whatever seems to work at the time. And it is certainly not taking your own internal feelings, labeling them a hunch, and blaming that voice in your head on God. Instead, knowing God's will actually requires building deliberate, logical lines of reason drawn directly from an educated biblical worldview.
Here is the highly practical method Dr. Meadors lays out for making tough choices. Step 1, engage that educated worldview. Step 2 is surprisingly physical. Map out your logic. Literally get a piece of paper and draw the lines connecting your reasoning from point A to point C. And finally, step 3, bounce those lines of reason off trusted peers who can actually challenge your logic before you go and apply it to a real-world decision.
And this rigorous process is exactly why Dr. Meadors strongly critiques other popular contemporary models, like the idea of relying on what feels spiritually expedient as long as it doesn't violate a direct moral command. See, because the noetic effect so heavily impacts even mature believers, we simply aren't trustworthy enough to just guess what is expedient in the heat of the moment. Our flawed minds require a structured map, not a gut guess.
Which leaves us with a pretty vital question to end on. Knowing how flawed our human nature is and how heavily our minds are affected by the fall, will you continue to act naively, relying on mere hunches and inner voices? Or will you do the rigorous, hard work of educating your worldview and physically building lines of reason to discover true wisdom? Ultimately, the choice and the work is yours.